Chapter 1. The Spark in the Dark. There is a moment, silent, unseen, uncelebrated, when the soul stirs in defiance. It doesn't roar. It doesn't scream. It whispers. A voice beneath the noise, beneath the doubt, beneath the weight of a world that keeps asking for compromise. It says, there is more. That moment is where everything begins. Not in applause. Not in comfort. Not in certainty. But in unrest. A sacred dissatisfaction. A friction between the life you live and the life you know could be. That friction is not a curse. It is your calling. The first flame that dances in the dark. And if you dare to feel it, if you dare to listen, not with your ears, but with that deeper place that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be, then you already know what must come next. You weren't born to sit safely in the shadows. You were born to ignite. The great ones, those whose names echo across history like thunder, were not made in calm waters. They were born of storms, forged in uncertainty, carried by vision, and baptized in failure. Single. Edison, failing thousands of times not because he sought the perfect filament, but because he was obsessed with lighting the world. Lincoln, wading through heartbreak, war, and loss, not because he chased power, but because something deeper pulled him toward the promise of unity. Disney, fired for lack of imagination. Imagine that. A man whose name would one day become synonymous with wonder, once cast aside by people who could not see beyond their own ceilings. And you are no different. Their blood is your blood. Their fire is your fire. The only thing separating them from the millions who vanish unnamed into the abyss of wasted potential is this. They answered the call. Will you? Because the dream is not going to chase you back. It's not going to coddle you. It's not going to explain itself in perfect detail before you leap. It's going to remain just out of reach, just blurry enough to feel uncertain, just close enough to feel unbearable. That's how dreams test you. That's how they separate the bold from the bored, the awake from the asleep. You want clarity before you move? You'll wait forever. You want guarantees before you jump? Then prepare to rot with the rest of the fearful. But if you can feel it, even now, that soft fire behind your ribs, that's not hope. That's you remembering. The mind wants proof. The heart wants permission. But the soul? The soul wants freedom. And freedom never came without sacrifice. We live in an age drowning in information but starving for direction. We scroll through illusions of greatness, trading time for distraction, ambition for approval. But legacy is not found in likes. Legacy is forged in the unseen hours. The quiet grind. The relentless refusal to die ordinary. The world will try to name you before you name yourself. It will hand you labels, boxes, roles, anything to keep you predictable, manageable, forgettable. But there is a revolt waiting inside you. It doesn't come with trumpets. It comes with tears, sweat, dust. It's the voice that says, this life, this version of me, is not enough. And it will keep whispering until you finally rise. You don't need a map. You need a decision. You don't need permission. You need a conviction. You don't need a guarantee. You need a willingness to burn the bridges behind you and bet everything on the vision ahead. Not the vision of what is easy, but the vision of what is necessary. What if the thing you fear the most isn't failure, but greatness? What if the weight pressing on your chest isn't doubt, but the gravity of your own potential begging to be unlocked? You think you're afraid of falling? You're afraid of flying, because flying means you can't pretend anymore. It means you can't blame the world. It means you can't hide behind someday. It means the world finally sees you, not the mask, not the modesty, not the diluted version that keeps people comfortable, but you, in all your truth. And truth is terrifying. But it is also the only place from which real power flows. Not the power that dominates, but the power that creates. The kind of power that built railroads through mountains, that sent rockets to the moon, that built bridges not just of steel, but of spirit. The same kind of power that woke Rosa Parks from silence, that pulled Nelson Mandela through prison, that made Malala raise her voice in the face of bullets. That same power lives in you. Not metaphorically, literally, biologically. Spiritually, it is you, stripped of excuses, cleansed of compromise, reborn through commitment. But to wield it, you must choose to stop waiting. The lie of our age is that we have time, that we can put it off, that we can build, someday, like a Lego set after lunch, that life will pause until we are ready. It won't. The clock is not your enemy. Indecision is. Because nothing drags you into regret like the dream you almost chased, the call you almost answered, the person you almost became. The dream doesn't care about your age, or your education, or your past. It only asks one question. Will you move? Because you don't become bold by thinking bold. You become bold by doing bold. By walking into the fog when you'd rather wait for the light. When Henry Ford said, "Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right," he wasn't offering a quote for Instagram. He was revealing the code behind all achievement. Belief is not fluff. It is the ignition switch. And once you flip it, the engine roars. And the old you, quiet, nice, compliant, dies screaming in the rearview mirror. Not because you hate who you were, but because you finally became who you were meant to be. You want to know what separates the visionary from the spectator? One dares to move while the paint is still wet, while the road is still dirt, while the applause is silence and the audience is gone. They move not because it's time, but because it's truth. So ask yourself, what if today is the first chapter of the story that redefines everything? What if this hour, this moment, right now, is not just another passing breath, but the spark before the blaze? Can you feel it? That subtle unrest, that haunting discontent, that whisper that says, you were made for more. It is not a weakness. It is the summons. And the world will keep spinning whether you rise or not. But if you do rise, if you choose this hour, this second, this breath to step forward, not as the person you've been, but as the legend you know you are becoming, then the entire axis of your life begins to shift. Not with fireworks, but with a decision. A sacred one. A dangerous one. A bold one. The dream does not come to those who wait. It comes to those who walk. It is not interested in excuses. Only evidence. Not perfection. Only movement. Not someday. So here you are. Standing on the edge of the life you know and the life you were born to build. There is no map. But there is fire. And if you are willing to let it consume you, to let it remake you, then step forward. This is the moment you stop chasing comfort and start chasing bold dreams. Chapter 2. Mindset, the architecture of becoming. Before empires are built in the world, they are first built in the mind. Long before steel touches stone, long before blueprints touch earth, long before the first brick is ever laid, the mind must be forged into something worthy of the vision it intends to carry. It must become the architect of its own destiny. Because no matter how bold your dreams may be, no matter how powerful your purpose or how vivid your vision, if the mind is weak, if the internal world is fractured, then the external world will collapse under its own weight. Mindset is not a buzzword. It is the bedrock upon which everything rests. It is the lens through which all adversity, all opportunity, all failure, and all success are interpreted, defined, and ultimately acted upon. A man who believes the world is conspiring against him will find enemies in every shadow. A woman who believes her value is dependent on others' approval will chain herself to invisible masters for a lifetime. But the person who trains their mind to see challenge as fuel, discomfort as growth, and resistance as a compass, that person becomes unstoppable. Thomas Edison once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That is not just optimism. That is mindset at war. That is a man who refused to surrender to reality as it was. He rebuilt the meaning of failure until failure itself became irrelevant. That is what you must learn to do, not to avoid failure, but to absorb it, reinterpret it, and weaponize it. To look chaos in the eye and whisper, "I was made for this." That kind of mental discipline doesn't happen by accident. It's a choice made every morning when your feet hit the floor. It's the internal dialogue when the alarm rings at 5 a.m. and your body screams for comfort. It's the words you speak to yourself when the world tells you you're not enough. It's the story you write inside your own mind when life feels unfair, when effort goes unnoticed, when results come late. Those are the moments when mindset is tested, not when it's easy, but when it's lonely, when it's dark, when it's quiet. The mind is like a wild horse. It doesn't care about your dreams, your goals, or your intentions unless you take the reins. Left untamed, it will run toward fear, toward doubt, toward distraction. But once trained, it becomes the greatest ally you'll ever know. It begins to filter pain into purpose, doubt into drive, and fear into focus. But it must be conditioned, shaped, strengthened through repetition and confrontation. Just as a muscle grows through tension, so too does the mind grow through adversity. That's why every setback, every heartbreak, every rejection isn't a detour, it's resistance training for the soul. It's life preparing you for the weight you say you want to carry. And that weight, that responsibility of creating something from nothing, is not light. Greatness never is. Andrew Carnegie, born into poverty in Scotland, spent his childhood working in factories just to survive. But he didn't allow his conditions to shape his mind. He used his mind to rise above his conditions. He read obsessively. He studied relentlessly. He reprogrammed his reality from the inside out. And that is what you must do. Because the external world is just a reflection of the internal one. Change the wiring of your belief system, and the world you live in begins to bend in response. But most people never get that far. Most people are living on mental autopilot, letting old programming run the show, programming they inherited, absorbed, or copied without ever questioning its truth. They've downloaded fear from their parents, hesitation from their teachers, limitation from their past. And unless you consciously uninstall that software, it will run your life. You don't rise to the level of your dreams. You fall to the level of your systems, and your mindset is the ultimate system. If it's built on scarcity, you will repel abundance. If it's built on comparison, you will destroy your uniqueness. If it's built on fear, you will sabotage your future. But if it's built on courage, clarity, and conviction, then nothing outside of you can ever dictate the limits of what's possible. The mind is both the battlefield and the weapon. And in the war for your future, it is either your greatest asset or your first betrayal. So how do you build a mindset that can carry your vision? You begin by telling the truth. Not the convenient truth. Not the socially acceptable truth. But the real, raw, brutal truth about where you are, what you believe, and how you think. Until you are brutally honest about your mental habits, you cannot change them. You must look in the mirror and ask, what stories am I telling myself that are keeping me small? What lies have I accepted as facts? What limits have I mistaken for laws? And then you go to war with those lies. One by one. You confront them, challenge them, and rewrite them. Because you are not your past. You are not your pain. You are not the voice that tells you to settle. You are the observer behind the thought. You are the writer holding the pen. And you can revise the script at any time, but only if you take control of the narrative. People talk about motivation like it's magic. But the truth is, motivation is a byproduct of alignment. When your vision, beliefs, and identity are all moving in the same direction, motivation becomes automatic. But when you believe one thing, say another, and act in a third, you create internal friction that tears you apart from the inside. The powerful mindset eliminates that friction. It creates internal congruence. It aligns your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions with your purpose. And from that place, you become dangerous. Not because you have all the answers, but because nothing can pull you off course. Not failure. Not judgment. Not fear. Walt Disney once said, "All our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them." But courage doesn't come from wishing. It comes from training your mind to value purpose over comfort, to see risk as a requirement rather than a threat. That is the mental framework of visionaries. They don't wait for certainty. They build it brick by brick. They don't follow the path, they create it. And that begins not with strategy, but with state. Not with tactics, but with identity. If you believe you are ordinary, no strategy will save you. But if you believe you are here to change the game, to defy expectation, to become a living monument to what is possible, then the world begins to bend. And yes, it will test you. Life doesn't hand over greatness. It demands proof. Proof of belief. Proof of consistency. Proof of endurance. The trials you face are not accidents, they are audits. They are testing whether your dream is anchored in fantasy or forged in resolve. If your mindset is weak, you will break. If your mindset is steel, you will bend the world. So now, I ask you not to chase inspiration. That will come and go like the wind. I ask you to become mentally unshakable. To become the kind of person who doesn't need ideal conditions to move, because they are the condition. The mindset is not the decoration. It is the foundation. It is what allows you to hold the weight of wild dreams. Without it, ambition crumbles. With it, nothing is impossible. This is the forge. This is the moment. This is where you stop wishing for better thoughts and start choosing them. Where you declare that you are no longer a passive participant in your own mind. From this moment forward, you are the architect. Chapter 3. Belief, Rewriting the Limits of Identity. Before you ever lift a finger, before your feet ever touch the ground, before a single word is spoken or a single goal written down, there is a silent force that shapes the course of your life. It is your belief. Not the beliefs you speak out loud to impress others, not the quotes you post or the mantras you repeat when things are easy, but the deep, often hidden convictions you carry about who you are and what you're allowed to become. Those beliefs are not passive, they are architects. They are not thoughts. They are blueprints. They do not merely influence your behavior, they dictate it. Every decision you make, every risk you take or refuse to take, every ceiling you bump into without ever realizing it's self-imposed, comes not from logic, but from identity. And identity is built not from what is true, but from what is believed. You can read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, study all the strategies, but if at your core, you do not believe you are worthy of success, if you do not believe you are powerful enough to build something legendary, if you do not believe you are capable of bending reality with your will, then your future will be a reflection of your internal permission slip, not your potential. Most people are not limited by what they can do. They are limited by what they think they can do. They are not trapped by external forces. They are trapped by the invisible fences of their own belief systems, installed by culture, reinforced by family, and left unchallenged for years. Belief is not something you inherit. It's something you choose. And if you never question your beliefs, you are not living your life. You are living someone else's. You are echoing patterns handed down to you from people who may have loved you, but who were also limited. Parents who taught you to play safe because they were afraid of the unknown. Teachers who told you to stay quiet because they were more interested in control than potential. Friends who couldn't celebrate your ambition because it reminded them of their own inaction. Their beliefs, their ceilings, their fears became your framework. But that framework is not a fact, it's a decision waiting to be rewritten. Henry Ford was born on a farm, surrounded by people who believed the future belonged to the horse and carriage. But he didn't inherit their belief system. He built his own. He envisioned an engine, a machine, a world transformed by mobility. And when others laughed or doubted or dismissed, he didn't argue, he created. And that creation was born not just of innovation, but of a belief so strong, so unwavering, that it pulled an entire industry into existence. That's what belief does. It bends reality. It infects possibility. It redefines what is considered normal. But belief is not magic. It's not a wish. It's not sitting on the couch and repeating affirmations into the air hoping the universe brings something to your doorstep. Belief is action's twin. It's forged through movement. You can't believe in yourself if you never give yourself evidence. You have to earn your own respect. You have to prove to yourself, again and again, that you are who you say you are. And that only happens when you do what others refuse to do. Act in alignment with your vision even when there is no applause, no validation, no guarantee of success. Because real belief isn't proven when everything is going well. It's revealed in the moments when everything seems to be falling apart. Nelson Mandela believed in justice in a world designed to silence him. He held on to that belief while sitting behind prison bars for 27 years, not because the world showed him evidence, but because he became the evidence. He embodied belief so fiercely that the very system built to crush him was eventually forced to negotiate with him. That is the power of unshakable belief. It doesn't just change lives. It changes history. But the trap that most fall into is this. They wait for belief to feel natural. They wait for the emotion to arrive before they take the action. And so they live their lives in limbo, waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel confident, waiting for the fear to disappear before they finally step into who they were meant to be. That moment never comes. Because belief is not born from comfort. It is born from fire. You believe by becoming. You become by doing. You do by deciding. You don't build belief in silence. You build it in motion. You build it by making promises to yourself and keeping them. You build it by choosing discipline when comfort is begging you to quit. You build it by doing hard things when nobody is watching, not because you want the world to see, but because you see. And every time you follow through, every time you choose alignment over avoidance, you send a message to your subconscious, I can be trusted. That message becomes a loop. That loop becomes identity. And that identity becomes your future. Belief is a muscle. If you don't use it, it withers. If you train it, it grows. And the gym where it's trained is your daily life. The choices you make, the standards you uphold, the battles you fight when nobody's clapping. Every time you walk toward fear, you make belief stronger. Every time you do the thing you said you would do, belief deepens. And eventually, that belief becomes so strong that it no longer needs evidence. It creates evidence. Steve Jobs once said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." Not because they're smarter, not because they're lucky, but because they believed when others waited. They moved when others paused. They saw a vision not with their eyes, but with their soul, and they refused to let reality dictate the terms of their imagination. But here's the truth nobody likes to admit. Belief is scary. Because once you truly believe, you remove your last excuse. As long as you doubt yourself, you can blame your inaction on uncertainty. But once you know what you're capable of, once you know what's possible, then there's only one thing left: responsibility. And that weight terrifies most people. It's easier to believe you can't. Easier to stay where it's safe. Easier to make peace with average than to wage war for greatness. But comfort is a liar. And belief is the key that unlocks everything that comfort has kept from you. So ask yourself now, what would your life look like if you believed fully in your ability to build it? What if you didn't just entertain the dream, but embodied it? What if you woke up tomorrow and moved through your day as if the outcome was already decided, because you believed that deeply in your direction? Not because someone else told you it would work. Not because the world gave you a sign. But because your own fire was enough. You were not born to blend. You were not born to shrink yourself to fit in rooms that do not deserve your presence. You were born to build, to stretch, to stand. But before you can do any of that, you must believe, not just in the dream, but in the one who dreams it. That belief is the foundation, the fuel, the force that will carry you through storms, through silence, through setbacks. It is the voice that says, "Still I rise," when everything in you wants to fall. So burn the old script. Burn the old lies. Burn the false ceilings. The time for hesitation has passed. This is the chapter where you decide who you are, and then you become it, unapologetically, relentlessly, irrevocably. You are not waiting on belief. Belief is waiting on you. Chapter 4. Clarity, sharpening the edge of intention. There is nothing more dangerous than a distracted mind armed with ambition. And nothing more powerful than a focused one shaped by clarity. Clarity is not just about knowing where you're going, it's about knowing why it matters so deeply that you're willing to die trying. Because without clarity, even the boldest dream becomes a maze. The steps blur. The purpose fades. Momentum leaks. And before long, you find yourself grinding for something you don't fully understand, burning energy but going nowhere. Ambition without clarity is just movement without meaning. It's noise, not progress. And in a world that profits off your confusion, staying unclear has become the default. But if you ever want to lead, to build, to rise beyond the noise, you must claim your clarity with surgical precision. You must carve it out of the chaos, protect it like sacred ground, and build your actions around it like steel architecture. Clarity doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from listening deeper, from stripping away all the voices, all the layers of influence, all the borrowed definitions of success, and finally asking, what is mine? What is the life that haunts me when the room goes quiet? What is the mission that burns beneath every excuse, every distraction, every moment I've ever compromised? And what am I willing to let go of? What version of myself must I kill off to finally pursue it without apology? Because clarity isn't found in more information. It's found in elimination, the courage to stop chasing everything and to start committing to one thing that matters more than all the rest. We live in a world addicted to volume. More input, more content, more noise. But greatness is not the result of more. It's the result of less but deeper. The most focused people in the world are not smarter than everyone else. They are simply more ruthless in their ability to say no. They do not let their calendar get hijacked by urgency. They do not let their attention get auctioned off to the highest bidder. They move through life with the clarity of a blade, cutting through distraction, slicing through indecision, and pursuing what matters with a level of obsession that borders on divine madness. It's not luck. It's not talent. It's clarity, enforced with discipline. When Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of a dream, he didn't ramble about 50 different causes. He spoke with unwavering clarity about one vision, a future where character meant more than color. That clarity lit a fire in millions. It wasn't vague. It wasn't politically correct. It was focused. When Elon Musk set out to build a rocket company, he wasn't driven by money or fame. He was driven by a brutally clear mission: to make life multiplanetary. Whether you agree or disagree with him is irrelevant. His clarity is undeniable, and that clarity fuels execution at a speed most people can't even process. Because clarity doesn't just inspire, it accelerates. It compresses time. It removes friction. It allows you to make decisions at the speed of vision rather than the speed of fear. But most people avoid clarity because clarity is dangerous. When you define the target, you also define what happens when you miss. As long as your goals are vague, your failure is invisible. You can pretend. You can rationalize. You can hide behind busyness and say you're figuring it out. But clarity removes your camouflage. It forces you to measure, to own, to admit when you're drifting off course. It is far more comfortable to be directionless than to face the accountability of focused intention. But comfort will not lead you where you want to go. Only clarity will. So how do you get it? Not by reading more. Not by consuming another 5 productivity hacks. But by getting still. By disconnecting from the world long enough to confront your own mind. By asking questions most people are too afraid to ask. What am I doing this for? What do I want, not just in theory, not just what looks good on paper, but what actually lights my bones on fire? What is the cost of not pursuing it? What pain will I have to live with if I get to the end of my life and realize I never had the courage to aim straight at what mattered most? Until you answer those questions with brutal honesty, you are driving with a fogged windshield, and speed in the wrong direction only takes you further away. The illusion that more effort can compensate for lack of clarity is a lie. You don't need more effort, you need better aim. Clarity is what gives that effort meaning. It is what transforms motion into momentum. And once you have it, once you define with precision what you want, who you are, and where you're going, then every yes becomes stronger, and every no becomes easier. You stop chasing every trend. You stop getting distracted by what other people are doing. You stop comparing your journey to someone else's highlight reel. Because you're no longer reacting, you're building. You're no longer trying to do everything, you're doing exactly what must be done, and nothing more. That is the edge. That is the power. That is what separates the intentional from the aimless. Abraham Lincoln, in one of the darkest chapters of American history, led with a clarity of principle that cost him friendships, allies, and ultimately his life. But his clarity about the preservation of the Union, about the dignity of all human life, gave him the spine to stand when most would have collapsed. That is the burden of clarity. It will not make you popular, but it will make you legendary. Because the world follows those who know. So stop pretending not to know. Stop waiting for perfect. Stop hiding behind indecision. Clarity is not a gift. It is a choice. It is the moment you stop looking outward for permission and look inward for precision. It is the moment you strip away the noise and say, This is what I will build. This is who I will become. And this is where I'm going. You don't need a 5-year plan. You need a 5-second decision to stop running from your truth and start living it with intensity. Because when you have clarity, the path may still be hard, but it is yours. The road may be uphill, but it leads home. The work may be brutal, but it becomes sacred. Because now, everything means something. Now, every moment serves the mission. Now, every action is an arrow pointed at the life you were meant to create. Clarity doesn't make things easier. It makes things possible. Chapter 5. Vision, designing the world before it exists. Vision is not a luxury. It's not decoration. It's not a dream journal entry, and it's certainly not just a list of goals written once a year and forgotten by February. Vision is survival. It's a lifeline through chaos, a lighthouse in the storm, a force so powerful that without it, even the strongest minds crumble under pressure. Because when the storms of doubt rise, when the world turns cold and nothing is working, it is only vision that reminds you what this pain is for. Vision is the ability to see what does not yet exist, to look at blank space, at failure, at emptiness, and still choose to create. Not because the conditions are favorable, but because the alternative, staying the same, is unbearable. And if belief is the engine and clarity is the compass, then vision is the destination. It is the imagined world that pulls you forward when everything around you is screaming to turn back. But here's the truth about vision. It's rarely respected at first. It's misunderstood, mocked, doubted, and dismissed, especially by those too afraid to confront their own lack of it. Every great visionary was once seen as naive, eccentric, delusional. Until they weren't. Until their vision, forged in silence, hardened by rejection, and carried by action, began to reshape the world itself. What most people call realistic is just a disguise for fear. And the moment you let fear dictate your vision, you amputate your future to fit the limitations of your present. The world has always belonged to those who could see it before it was built. The Wright brothers didn't just look at the sky and admire birds. They saw human flight decades before the science caught up. Nikola Tesla didn't just improve electricity. He imagined a world where energy moved invisibly, effortlessly, across great distances, long before anyone believed such a thing could exist. And Walt Disney, standing in a swamp in Florida, surrounded by bugs and mud, pointed to an empty horizon and declared it the future site of a magical kingdom. People laughed. And today, hundreds of millions walk through the gates of that kingdom. Not because the land changed, but because the vision did. That's the power of vision. It bends reality. It doesn't wait for permission or predictability. It moves forward without proof. And the mistake that most people make is that they think vision has to be shared to be real. That it has to be understood by others before it can be pursued. But the most important visions are deeply personal, often lonely, and almost always invisible to everyone but the one carrying it. And if you need the world to validate your vision before you act on it, then you don't have vision, you have vanity. Vision is not about being seen. It's about seeing clearly, obsessively, relentlessly, what could be, and deciding that you will not rest until it exists. It's not easy. It's not pretty. Sometimes it's not even fun. But it is necessary. Because without a vision that stretches you, that pulls you forward, that lifts your eyes beyond the distractions of now, you will spend your life reacting to the demands of others, chasing goals that don't belong to you, and wondering why achievement feels empty. A real vision does not just motivate. It transforms. It changes how you speak, how you show up, how you treat time. It makes you sharper, bolder, less tolerant of excuses, distractions, and anything that doesn't serve the mission. It becomes the filter for your decisions, the magnet for your energy, and the standard by which you begin to measure everything. Because when you've seen what's possible, you can no longer be satisfied with what is. But crafting vision is not a passive exercise. It requires brutal self-inquiry. It requires you to disconnect from the noise of expectation and dare to ask yourself questions most people run from. If I could build anything, what would I build? If I could lead, serve, create in the boldest way possible, what would that look like? What impact would I want to have if no one could stop me, not even myself? What legacy would I want to leave, not just for applause, but for truth? Those answers are not found in comfort. They are mined in the fire. Vision emerges from tension, from conflict, from the ache of possibility rubbing up against the weight of current limitation. It is born in moments of silence and expanded in moments of decision. But it must be revisited constantly, protected, nurtured, and refined, not just once at the beginning, but every time doubt creeps in. Because doubt is not a signal to stop. It is a signal to return to the reason you began. You do not need to see every step to walk forward. You do not need a fully detailed roadmap to take action. You need direction fueled by vision and the willingness to stumble forward, trusting that the steps will reveal themselves as you move. That is how every revolution has begun. That is how every empire, every breakthrough, every movement, every impossible feat was born. Not in certainty, but in vision so strong that even uncertainty had to bow to it. And vision is not just about what you want to create. It's about who you must become to create it. That is the part no one tells you. That the gap between you and your vision is not filled with luck. It's filled with evolution. You must become someone you are not yet. And that evolution will demand everything. It will tear away your distractions, your habits, your crutches, your limitations, and it will replace them with discipline, hunger, humility, and fire. Because vision is not just a future. It is a mirror. It reflects back to you the gap between your current self and your highest potential. And if that gap doesn't terrify you, then your vision isn't big enough. So when people ask you what you're chasing, don't just give them a number. Don't just talk about income, or fame, or impact in vague terms. Give them the fire. Give them the storm. Speak your vision so clearly that they feel the ground shake beneath their assumptions. Not because you need their approval, but because you need to be reminded that this is not a game. This is war. A war for possibility. A war against mediocrity. A war for what you know could exist, if you have the courage to build it. This is the dividing line. Between those who react and those who create. Between those who drift and those who design. Between those who merely survive and those who decide to build a world worth living in. So ask yourself, what is the world I'm building? What is the future I refuse to die without creating? And who must I become, starting now, to make that vision inevitable? Vision without action is hallucination. But action without vision is wasted life. You were not given imagination to escape reality. You were given imagination to rebuild it. Chapter 6. Purpose, the fire that outlives motivation. At some point on the journey toward anything that matters, motivation will disappear. It will vanish not because you are weak or uncommitted, but because no human being can live in a permanent state of inspiration. Motivation is fleeting by design. It's the spark that starts the fire, but it was never meant to keep it burning. The fire that sustains you, the one that stays lit through exhaustion, through heartbreak, through failure, through long stretches of silence and doubt, is not built from motivation. It's built from purpose. And purpose is not just a slogan. It's not a hashtag or a line in a journal. It is the unshakable conviction that this thing you are building, chasing, becoming, it matters beyond you. That if you stopped, if you walked away, if you gave in to fear or convenience, something sacred would be lost. Something only you were meant to carry. Purpose is the force that turns pain into power. It is the reason why some people survive tragedy and emerge stronger, while others collapse under the weight of their circumstances. It's not because one had an easier path. It's because one of them assigned meaning to the pain. They saw the wound not as punishment but as preparation. And purpose gives that kind of pain a place to go. Without purpose, suffering becomes chaos. With purpose, suffering becomes fuel. Think of Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived the horror of Nazi concentration camps. He lost his family. He was beaten, starved, dehumanized. And yet through all of it he never let go of one thing, the belief that suffering, if given meaning, could become strength. He watched men die not from hunger or cold, but from purposelessness, from the death of hope. Frankl's purpose became his compass, and even in the darkest places on earth, he kept moving forward. Not because he was motivated, but because he knew there was still something inside him the world needed. That belief became his weapon against the void. This is what most people misunderstand. They think purpose is a luxury, something you find once life is stable. But it's the opposite. Purpose isn't the result of having made it. It's the requirement for enduring everything it takes to get there. Purpose is what keeps you moving when the spotlight disappears, when progress stalls, when everything you've built starts falling apart, when the crowd stops clapping, when the voice in your head starts asking if this is all worth it. Motivation cannot carry you through those seasons. Only purpose can. Purpose doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It shows up in the quiet realization that someone out there needs what you've been through, that the lessons hidden in your scars might save someone else years of suffering, that your unique fire, when disciplined and expressed, might become a lighthouse for people you'll never meet. Purpose often doesn't feel grand. It feels true. It feels heavy, like responsibility. But it's that weight that gives your work substance. Without it, everything you build will eventually feel hollow. That's why people chase success and still feel empty. Because success without purpose is just decoration on a dying tree. It might look impressive, but inside, it's rotting. To find your purpose, you have to stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What am I needed for? What injustice am I unwilling to tolerate? What truth burns in me that I cannot stay silent about? What have I lived through, survived, conquered, that someone else is still stuck inside of? What is the story I've buried that, if spoken out loud, might set someone else free?" Purpose does not always come from a divine revelation. Sometimes it comes from paying attention to the thing that won't leave you alone. That vision you can't unsee. That ache that returns again and again. That problem in the world that enrages you not just because it exists, but because you know you were born to help fix it. That is purpose knocking, not on your door, but on your chest. And every time you ignore it, a little part of you starts to fade. People will try to talk you out of your purpose. They'll tell you to be practical. They'll tell you to aim smaller. They'll question your ambition because it makes them uncomfortable with their own. And if your purpose isn't strong enough, if you haven't welded it into your identity, you will be tempted to listen. But the only people qualified to give you advice on your purpose are the ones who are actively living out their own. Everyone else is projecting fear, not wisdom. Purpose is not about you becoming special. It's about you becoming useful. It's about stepping into a life where your talents, your story, your pain, your obsession, your intensity, all of it is directed at something bigger than your ego. That's why purpose makes you magnetic. Because when you move with purpose, people feel it before they understand it. They sense that you are no longer chasing approval. That your actions are not about proving something, they are about building something. And that shift changes everything. Andrew Carnegie understood this. After rising from poverty to become one of the wealthiest men in history, he gave away nearly all of his fortune, not out of guilt, but out of purpose. He believed that wealth was only justified if it was used to lift others. He built libraries, universities, and institutions because he saw money not as a status symbol, but as a tool for legacy. That clarity of purpose outlived his name. That's what real purpose does. It builds beyond the individual. So if you're tired, if you're lost, if you're stuck in a cycle of effort without meaning, don't reach for more motivation. Stop chasing the next dopamine hit. Instead, go deeper. Find the thing inside you that won't die. The mission that terrifies you because it demands everything you are. The service that requires your strength. The truth that will offend people but heal others. That is where purpose lives. Not in comfort but in calling. And once you have it, everything changes. Your standards rise. Your discipline sharpens. Your time becomes sacred. Your patience expands, but your tolerance for mediocrity disappears. Because now you're not just working. You're serving. You're not just grinding. You're building legacy. You're not just living. You're fulfilling an assignment. Purpose doesn't guarantee ease. It guarantees meaning. It doesn't remove obstacles. It makes them necessary. Because every challenge, every setback, every failure becomes part of the mission, not a detour from it. And that mindset turns pressure into power. So ask yourself this, not with haste but with total honesty. What would I still do even if I knew it would never be celebrated? What would I still build if no one ever clapped? What is so necessary that I would rather struggle with it than succeed without it? That is the fire. That is the reason. That is the kind of purpose that turns ordinary lives into extraordinary legacies. Find it. Fuel it. Follow it without compromise. Because when the storm comes, and it will come, your purpose will be the only thing left standing between who you are and who you were born to become. Chapter 7. Discipline, the bridge between intention and impact. There comes a moment in every journey where desire is no longer enough. Where excitement fades, where motivation dries up, where even clarity and purpose begin to feel distant, and all you're left with is the quiet pressure of responsibility, the weight of your own promises. And it's in that moment, when nothing feels electric anymore, when the dream feels like work and the path ahead is long, that one force must rise and take command: discipline. Because discipline is what stands up when your emotions sit down. It's what keeps you building long after the honeymoon is over. It's what turns ambition into results and vision into legacy. Discipline is not about perfection, nor is it about self-punishment. It is about alignment, the sacred agreement between your future and your behavior, between your highest identity and your daily choices. Without discipline, your greatness will always stay theoretical. People talk about discipline like it's a character trait, like some people are just born with it, but that's a lie. No one is born with discipline. It is earned. It is engineered. It is trained in the moments when giving up would be easy and justified, but you don't. It is built in the dark, when no one is watching and no one is cheering. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting, but it is foundational. The people you admire, the ones who seem unstoppable, unshakable, untouchable, they don't rely on motivation. They rely on systems. They rely on non-negotiables. They have removed emotion from the equation of their progress. They've made their commitment stronger than their mood. You think Thomas Edison had endless bursts of inspiration while failing over 10,000 times to invent the light bulb? Of course not. What he had was discipline. He had a routine of experimentation. He had a relentless commitment to testing, failing, learning, repeating. He treated innovation like labor. And that labor, sustained over time, gave us electricity. What you see as genius was really just structured obsession. And that's the truth no one wants to hear, that discipline is not the enemy of creativity, it is its engine. Without discipline, your potential becomes chaos. It's the structure that allows chaos to be directed into something meaningful. Vision without discipline is fantasy. Discipline without vision is exhaustion. But together they create impact. Discipline starts with identity. You cannot sustain habits that contradict how you see yourself. If you believe you're inconsistent, you will sabotage any routine that begins to show momentum. If you believe you're weak, you will find ways to fail just so you can prove yourself right. But if you decide, truly decide, that you are the kind of person who honors their word, who shows up regardless of the weather, the feeling, the convenience, then your behavior will begin to bend in that direction. And that's the shift most people never make. They try to change their habits while clinging to an outdated self-concept. You can't do both. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to act like someone else. It's about finally aligning your actions with the person you already know you are, beneath the excuses. But it's hard. Of course it's hard. That's the point. Discipline is supposed to hurt. Not in a punishing way, but in a strengthening way. Just like a muscle must be torn to grow, your will must be tested to deepen. The early mornings, the focused hours, the missed parties, the relentless attention to details that no one else sees, that's the price. And the world will tempt you every single day to trade the eternal for the immediate, to scroll instead of build, to rest instead of push, to complain instead of commit. And that's when you'll know, this is the work. This is the moment most people choose ease. This is the moment I don't. Because every time you do what needs to be done, especially when you don't feel like it, you reinforce a neural identity that says, I am disciplined. And over time, that identity becomes your default. Discipline doesn't mean you never waver. It means you don't quit. It doesn't mean you love the work every second. It means you respect it too much to dishonor it. Discipline is not romantic, it's brutal, but it's honest. And it is the only thing that will carry you from one level to the next, when nothing else can. Henry Ford, building the Model T and transforming the automobile industry, did not rely on bursts of brilliance. He built systems. He committed to processes. He showed up day after day, not just to create a product, but to reshape an industry. He had vision, but it was his discipline that scaled that vision into an empire. And that's what you must understand. Discipline doesn't just help you start, it helps you scale. It takes your ambition and gives it structure. It takes your goal and turns it into a standard. You don't get the body by going to the gym when it's convenient. You don't build the business by working when you feel like it. You don't master a skill by practicing only when it's fun. You get those results by showing up regardless. By turning practice into principle. By refusing to let your feelings govern your future. The calendar becomes law. The standard becomes non-negotiable. And suddenly, the dream that once felt distant begins to solidify, not because you discovered a secret, but because you did the work no one else was willing to do, long enough for it to matter. And that's the truth. Most people don't fail because they lacked potential. They fail because they lacked consistency. They started, but they didn't sustain. They made a plan, but didn't follow through. They wanted results, but they weren't willing to live the kind of life that produces them. And that's what separates the extraordinary from the average. Not talent, but tenacity. Not brilliance, but discipline. The daily, brutal, boring, necessary execution of what must be done, especially when it doesn't feel good. That's the price. And you either pay it, or you settle. But when you embrace it, when you stop resenting the grind and start respecting it, discipline becomes something else. It becomes freedom. Because now, you no longer wait for the right mood. You don't depend on the external world to determine your output. You've become self-commanding. Your life is no longer a reaction, it's a declaration. And with every day that you honor your word, you become more dangerous. Not to others, but to every excuse, every old version of you, every story that said you weren't capable of this. Discipline is the forge. It is the daily proof that you are becoming who you said you'd be. And if you want to know how close you are to the future you dream about, don't look at your inspiration. Don't look at your ideas. Look at your habits. Because your habits are your rituals of belief. They are the behaviors that declare, I'm not just talking about this, I'm becoming it. So now the question is simple. Can you show up for your future before it shows up for you? Can you build when it's boring? Can you execute when it's inconvenient? Can you rise before the sun, not because someone told you to, but because you told you to? That's discipline. That's the bridge. And it's waiting. Chapter 8, Action. Making the leap before you're ready. There is a moment that separates dreamers from builders, thinkers from doers, planners from warriors. A moment that most never reach because they wait too long, calculate too much, and hesitate just enough to lose their momentum. That moment is the leap, the transition from internal preparation to external pursuit, from theory to practice, from imagination to confrontation with the real world. And that moment demands action. Not rehearsed, not perfect, not entirely planned, just honest, committed, imperfect action. Because no amount of thinking, journaling, meditating, or visualizing can replace the raw, electric force of doing. You cannot think your way into greatness. You must move. You must risk. You must act. The world is full of intelligent minds trapped in paralyzed bodies, people who know everything about execution but have never actually executed. They've read the books. They've taken the courses. They know all the tools and techniques. But when it comes time to leap, to speak, to write, to launch, to build, to ask, to risk, to commit, they hesitate. They wait for readiness. They wait for certainty. They wait for the fear to pass. And so they wait forever, circling the runway, while life, messy, unpredictable, beautifully unfair life, passes them by. Because here's the truth, you will never be ready. Readiness is not a prerequisite for greatness. It is a result of it. The people who built the world you live in were not ready. The people who changed history, disrupted industries, built legacies, they were not fully prepared. They did not have all the answers. But they moved anyway. They understood something that most people never learn. You learn by leaping. You figure it out in the fire. You grow while building. You calibrate in flight. Because action is not the result of confidence. Action is the generator of it. You don't act because you believe in yourself. You believe in yourself because you act. Confidence is not something you get from wishing. It's something you earn from doing the thing you were afraid of and realizing you didn't die. You must understand, the idea that you're supposed to wait until you're ready is a cultural lie designed to protect you from failure, but it also protects you from growth. If you only act when you feel like it, when conditions are perfect, when you have every detail figured out, then what you're doing is not courageous. It's comfortable. It's safe. It's sterile. And nothing world-changing was ever built in sterile environments. Action demands mess. It demands friction. It demands that you enter the arena covered in self-doubt and sweat and imperfect execution, but still swinging, still fighting, still putting your name on something real. Walt Disney was not ready to revolutionize entertainment. He had no business plan when he mortgaged his home to finish Snow White. Elon Musk wasn't ready to build reusable rockets or electric cars. He was laughed at by people with far more technical experience. Oprah Winfrey wasn't ready to become one of the most influential women in media. She was fired from her first reporting job and told she was unfit for television. None of them waited for validation. They moved with conviction. They moved with vision. And most importantly, they moved. Action is the great separator. Because no matter how many people share your dream, most of them will never take the first step. They'll talk about it. They'll romanticize it. They'll wait for the timing to feel just a little better, the fear to feel a little smaller. And in the meantime, someone else, with half their talent but twice their courage, will act and win. Not because they were better, but because they were willing. Because they understood that failure isn't final, hesitation is. That action isn't the opposite of fear, it is the answer to it. Action is not about speed for the sake of speed. It's about responsiveness. When the idea hits, do you capture it or let it fade? When the opportunity presents itself, do you raise your hand or retreat? When the door opens a crack, do you walk through it or wait for someone to carry you across the threshold? These moments don't wait. They evaporate. And once they're gone, they rarely return. Action is about honoring the moment you're in and choosing not to betray your future by waiting for a more comfortable present. But let's be clear, action is painful. Not in the obvious sense, but in the quiet, invisible kind of pain that comes from confronting the gap between your expectation and reality. The pain of rejection. The pain of being ignored. The pain of launching something and watching it fall flat. The pain of trying, failing, adjusting, trying again. But that pain is productive. That pain teaches you what books can't. That pain is the friction that sharpens your edge. It's not a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's confirmation that you're in the arena, finally playing instead of just watching. And you don't need to take 100 steps. You just need to take one. The first action is always the hardest because it's the death of the old version of you. The hesitant, overthinking, passive you, and the birth of something new. That step redefines you. It shifts your identity. You are no longer someone who is trying to figure it out. You are now someone who is in motion. And motion creates momentum. Once you're moving, everything gets easier. The fear fades. The resistance weakens. The next step appears. And soon, you're not just chasing a dream, you're building it. But remember this. Action without reflection becomes chaos. Action without intention becomes burnout. So act, but don't rush. Move, but move with purpose. Take bold steps, not because you want to impress anyone, but because you're finally tired of living in theory. You've spent enough time planning. You've spent enough time doubting. You've spent enough time imagining a version of you that only exists in thought. The time for becoming that version begins now, not tomorrow, not when you feel more ready, not when your schedule clears or the fear subsides. Now. In this breath. In this hour. In this one wild and irreplaceable life. Because the difference between the life you live and the life you're capable of will never be defined by your ideas. It will be defined by your action. Chapter 9. Gratitude, the power of remembering while you build. When you are in pursuit of something massive, something that stretches your limits and dares you to become someone you have never been before, it's easy to become consumed by the future, by the distance between where you are and where you want to be. The mind begins to obsess over progress, over performance, over results that haven't arrived yet. You start to measure your value by what's missing, by what you haven't achieved, by how far you still have to climb. And slowly, without realizing it, you lose sight of everything you've already overcome. You forget the path behind you. You forget the battles you've won, the storms you've survived, the moments you thought you couldn't go further but did anyway. You forget that today's stress is something your past self once prayed for. That's why gratitude is not a break from the grind, it's part of it. It's not a soft, sentimental detour from building bold dreams. It's the anchor that keeps you centered while you build them. It's how you keep your heart full while your hands are still reaching forward. Gratitude isn't about pretending that everything is perfect. It's not about faking joy or silencing ambition. It's about recognizing that even in the middle of pressure and pain, you're still holding something sacred. It's about seeing clearly, remembering that progress is not just about reaching the top, it's about not being where you started. It's the perspective that reminds you, in the middle of chaos, that you are still becoming. That there was a time when this version of hard was still a dream. The trap of ambition is that it's never satisfied. And that hunger can be powerful. It can drive you, sharpen you, propel you through resistance. But if left unchecked, it can also blind you. It can trick you into thinking you're always behind. That nothing is enough. That no matter how much you build, you're still somehow failing. That mindset creates emotional bankruptcy. You end up chasing more without ever feeling more. That's where gratitude comes in, not to soften you, but to save you. To remind you that fulfillment is not something you find after the journey is over. It's something you practice during the journey, breath by breath, moment by moment, decision by decision. Think about the builders of history, the people who changed the world through pain, pressure, sacrifice. Abraham Lincoln, during a time of war and national fracture, still wrote with gentleness and deep empathy for human suffering. Nelson Mandela, locked away for decades, wrote letters filled with grace and forgiveness, never once allowing bitterness to consume him. These were not weak men. They were driven, disciplined, unrelenting. But what made them whole was not just their vision. It was their capacity to stay rooted in perspective. That is what gratitude does. It keeps the soul from becoming corrupted by progress. It keeps the fire burning clean. You can be deeply ambitious and deeply grateful at the same time. In fact, you must be. Because if you build a life of achievement without appreciation, you are constructing a mansion on sand. It may look impressive, but it will never feel like home. Gratitude is what makes your journey worth living while you're still living it. It's what turns discipline into devotion. It's what reminds you that the work is not just about the outcome, it's about the process, the people, the becoming. And no, gratitude is not always easy. When life is punching you in the gut, when results are late, when the vision feels distant and your heart feels heavy, gratitude feels like the last thing you want to reach for. But it's exactly in those moments that you need it most. Not as a way to pretend you're fine, but as a way to stabilize your soul, to remind yourself that pain and progress can coexist, that you are still here, still breathing, still becoming. And that means you still have something to be thankful for. Sometimes, gratitude is not loud or poetic. Sometimes, it's simply a deep inhale and the quiet acknowledgement that, despite everything, you haven't given up. You might think gratitude is passive, that it slows you down. But that's a misunderstanding. Gratitude is clarity. It sharpens your focus by removing the mental noise of comparison, entitlement, and false urgency. It reconnects you with your why, the reason you began this climb in the first place. When your identity becomes consumed by goals and numbers, gratitude brings you back to truth, to people, to purpose, to the real work, not just the visible rewards. And let's not forget this, gratitude isn't just for what's working. It's also for what's broken. For the setbacks that woke you up. For the betrayals that revealed your strength. For the failures that redirected your path. You cannot claim to be grateful for your future if you're not also grateful for the lessons that shaped your present. You must learn to thank the very things that hurt you, not because they were good, but because they grew you. That kind of gratitude is rare. But it's also the kind that forges resilience. It's the kind that makes you unshakable, not because life is easy, but because you know how to mine gold from pain. Gratitude is a practice, not a feeling. And like any practice, it must be intentional. It must be chosen. It must be built into your routine, not as a chore, but as a strategy. It is mental armor. It is emotional leverage. It is your reminder that no matter how far you have to go, you are already living the miracle of movement. You are not stuck. You are not lost. You are in motion. And for that alone, you can be grateful. So take a moment, not tomorrow, not next week, but now. Look at your life. Not at what's missing, but at what's already here. At what you've carried. At what you've overcome. At what you're building. And then breathe. Let that gratitude ground you. Let it humble you. Let it strengthen you. Because the boldest builders are not just driven, they are rooted. They are not just moving forward, they are remembering as they go. And when the world tries to make you forget, when the pressure to succeed at all costs tries to steal your joy, gratitude will be your resistance. It will be your rebellion. A refusal to build a meaningful life and forget to feel it. A refusal to chase legacy and forget to live the moments that create it. Gratitude doesn't slow you down. It keeps you alive on the way up. Chapter 10. Adaptability, staying fluid in a world that never stops changing. No matter how carefully you plan, how fiercely you believe, how intensely you prepare, life will not unfold in a straight line. The path will shift. The rules will change. The tools you started with will become obsolete. People you thought would stay forever will leave. Strategies that once worked will break down without warning. Markets will collapse. Momentum will stall. Circumstances will turn upside down without apology or explanation. And in those moments, your ability to adapt, to pivot, to adjust, to release the old and build anew, will define not just the outcome of your dream, but the quality of your life. Because adaptability is not just a survival skill. It is a power skill. It is the mental and emotional flexibility that allows you to stay grounded in purpose while fluid in process. And without it, every change becomes a crisis. Every deviation feels like failure. Every challenge becomes a threat. But with it, change becomes fuel. Disruption becomes opportunity. Uncertainty becomes a canvas. Adaptability is what allows you to hold vision in one hand and agility in the other. It's what keeps you from becoming rigid in the pursuit of something you once needed, but no longer fits who you are becoming. The mistake so many people make is confusing consistency with stubbornness. They think staying the same is the same thing as staying committed. But those are not the same. Consistency is doing what's necessary in alignment with your purpose. Stubbornness is doing what's familiar because it's comfortable, even when it no longer serves you. Adaptability is the willingness to evolve. To reinvent, to shed the skin of who you were without mourning it. It's not about quitting. It's about redirecting. And sometimes, redirecting is the most courageous thing you can do. Think of every innovator who outlasted their generation. They weren't just talented. They were adaptable. Steve Jobs got fired from his own company, and instead of retreating into bitterness, he used the time to recalibrate, reinvent, and return with a deeper vision. The result was the iPod, the iPhone, the reinvention of Apple itself. Darwin didn't say the strongest survive. He said the most adaptable do. And in today's world, where industries shift overnight, where relevance is a moving target, where the shelf life of knowledge keeps shrinking, adaptability isn't optional. It's essential. But adaptability is hard because it often requires letting go of identity. It asks you to stop defining yourself by what you've always done, and instead define yourself by what you're capable of doing next. And that can feel like a kind of death, the death of certainty, of structure, of a version of you that once felt safe. But if you want to evolve, if you want to stay in motion when others freeze, you have to mourn what was and embrace what can be. That's what adaptability is, not just reacting to change, but partnering with it. And make no mistake, there will be seasons where the world forces your hand, where the dream you had doesn't fit anymore, where your strategy fails, where your timing is off, where your plan becomes irrelevant. And in those moments, you'll be tempted to grip harder, to double down, to keep pushing because you don't want to give up. But adaptation is not giving up. It's letting go of the illusion of control. It's having the humility to say, this isn't working, and I'm brave enough to try something new. That humility doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous. Because now, you're not married to the method, you're married to the mission. And when you're married to the mission, you stop needing life to go exactly as planned. You stop being thrown off by detours. You stop mistaking delays for defeat. Because you know the mission is alive. It can breathe, stretch, transform. You stop clinging to outcomes and start responding to reality. That's what elite performers, athletes, creators, and visionaries all have in common. They don't resist change. They absorb it. They integrate it. They stay light on their feet. They move with the storm, not against it. They pivot without losing their center. That's adaptability, and that's longevity. But adaptability isn't just external. It's internal. It's emotional. It's psychological. It's the ability to hold your plans loosely and your identity even looser. To wake up one day and realize that the version of you who started the dream is no longer the version who must finish it. And that's a hard truth. Because we fall in love with who we were. We get attached to how we did things, how we defined success, how we saw ourselves. And yet, growth demands death. The death of old habits. The death of old ambitions. The death of past strategies. And if you are unwilling to let go, you become your own limitation. So many people fail not because they weren't good, but because they weren't fluid. They were incredible for who they were 5 years ago. But they never updated the system. They never released the ego long enough to see clearly. And so they held on to strategies that used to work, but no longer apply. They held on to relationships, roles, and routines that kept them anchored in a version of life that was already fading. Adaptability would have saved them. Not by making things easier, but by making them possible again. And here's the truth, you can either evolve by choice or by force. Life will ask you to grow. It will send pressure, pain, disruption, even loss, not to punish you, but to shape you. And if you resist, if you cling, if you hide, you'll break. But if you adapt, if you breathe, assess, adjust, and keep moving, you become. You rise through change. You turn obstacles into adjustments. You turn endings into redirections. You turn breakdowns into breakthroughs. That is the power of adaptability. Not just to survive change, but to lead through it. To stand tall in the fog and say, I may not know what's coming next, but I know who I am becoming through it. You become not the version of yourself you once planned to be, but the version required by the world you're stepping into. That's not weakness. That's mastery. So let go of needing things to look the way you imagined. Let go of the plan that stopped working. Let go of the expectation that progress will be linear. And instead, root yourself in the only thing you can truly control, your ability to respond, to remain grounded in purpose, while completely open to what the path demands now. Because the world will change. The market will shift. The winds will turn. And in that chaos, the ones who rise will not be the ones who resist it, but the ones who dance with it. Adaptability doesn't mean giving up your dream. It means updating the way you chase it, again and again, for as long as it takes. Chapter 11. Resilience, standing up every time the world says stay down. Every bold dream will break you at some point. That is not a flaw in the system, it is part of the process. You will face defeat not once or twice, but dozens of times. Plans will fail. People will disappoint you. You will invest time, money, energy, and love into things that collapse in your hands. You will be misunderstood, underestimated, ignored, and criticized. And in those moments, not the moments of glory, but the moments of gut-wrenching loss, something inside you will be asked to decide, do I stay down or do I rise again? That decision, repeated again and again through the fire, is what we call resilience. It's not a moment of triumph. It's not a burst of energy. It's the quiet, steady, unshakable commitment to keep showing up even when everything feels like it's falling apart. Resilience is not about pretending you're invincible. It's not about walking through pain like it doesn't matter. It's about feeling every ounce of it, bleeding from it, grieving it, and still saying, I'm not done. It's not about hiding your wounds. It's about learning how to walk with them, how to build while broken, how to stand when standing feels like defiance. And the truth is, nobody escapes this path without scars. The people who rise to greatness, who build legacies that last, who change the game and rewrite the rules, they are not the ones who never fell. They are the ones who refused to stay down. The ones who crawled forward when walking wasn't an option. The ones who stitched their dreams back together after life tore them apart. Resilience is not a trait reserved for the chosen. It's a choice available to anyone, but claimed by few. Because it's not glamorous. It's not celebrated in the beginning. It looks like failing in private. It looks like waking up to silence. It looks like being the only one who believes when the results keep saying no. But it is in those moments that something deeper is formed, a kind of internal armor that cannot be bought, borrowed, or taught. It must be earned. It must be forged. And it is forged in the moments you want to quit more than anything, but don't. Abraham Lincoln failed in business, lost elections, suffered depression so severe it nearly killed him, and yet he became the president who would hold a fractured nation together. But because he didn't let failure become his final form. Because he used each collapse as a deeper reason to rise. Oprah Winfrey was abused, rejected, told she didn't belong in television, and yet she built an empire by turning pain into power. J.K. Rowling was a single mother, living on welfare, rejected by publisher after publisher, and still she kept writing until her words transformed her entire world. That's what resilience does. It doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees that you will not die ordinary. It guarantees that you will not let the opinion of the moment define the trajectory of your life. And that matters, because if you give up in the valley, you never find out what the mountaintop feels like. Most people do. They stop at the first wall, the first no, the first rejection. They take pain as a message to retreat, when in reality it's a message to dig deeper. Pain is not always a warning. Sometimes it is a test. A question from the universe asking, do you want this badly enough to be broken for it? And if you say yes, not just once, but again and again, something shifts. The pain doesn't disappear, but it becomes bearable. The wounds don't vanish, but they become fuel. You stop being surprised by failure. You stop negotiating with resistance. You understand that suffering is not proof that you're off course. It's proof that you're doing something real. Something worth fighting for. Resilience means accepting that the climb will hurt, but climbing anyway. It means getting up one more time than you fall, no matter how bruised or bitter or exhausted you feel. And no, resilience isn't about pretending everything's okay. It's about being honest that things are not okay, and still choosing to keep going. It's about crying when you need to, resting when you must, but never letting temporary pain destroy permanent purpose. It's about remembering that pain is not the opposite of progress, it's the partner of it. You cannot become unbreakable without first breaking. You cannot become wise without first failing. You cannot become powerful without first enduring. Resilience means refusing to let the past predict the future. It means understanding that failure is data, not identity. That just because it didn't work yet doesn't mean it never will. That every setback is not a stop sign. It's a recalibration. It's a reminder to adapt, to evolve, to keep swinging with cleaner technique, sharper vision, deeper grit. Because the game doesn't reward those who start. It rewards those who stay, through the nights when no one is watching, through the seasons where nothing makes sense, through the storms where everything breaks down. If you can stay through that, you will rise into something no storm can ever touch. But you have to want it. Not in a passive, polite way. You have to want it fiercely enough to endure being shattered for it. Because this is not about achieving something for applause. This is about becoming someone the world cannot ignore. This is about leaving behind a version of you that would have quit, and rising as the version who never will again. So when life knocks the breath from your lungs, when the results don't match the effort, when your heart is tired and your vision is blurry, don't ask, why me? Ask, what now? Because if you're still here, if you're still breathing, if the dream still haunts you, then it's not over. This is not your ending. It's your forge. And if you keep moving through it, bruised, bloody, limping, you will come out the other side with something most people never earn. A life built not just from talent or timing or luck, but from unshakable fire. That is resilience. And no one can give it to you. But once you find it, no one can ever take it away. Chapter 12. Becoming, the final crossing into who you were meant to be. There is a moment, far beyond the noise, beyond the struggle, beyond the highs and lows, beyond the applause and the failure and the rebuilding, when you realize that you are no longer chasing the dream. You are the dream. You are no longer trying to become someone else. You are no longer constructing an identity out of borrowed ambition or proving your worth to a world that was never designed to understand your path. You are no longer obsessing over the gap between where you are and where you wish to be, because the version of you that once waited to arrive has already begun to emerge. That is the essence of becoming. Not a singular moment. Not a grand ceremony. But a silent revolution that happens inside you when every choice, every scar, every sacrifice finally catches up with who you've always known you could be. Becoming is not about arrival. It's about recognition. It's about waking up one day and realizing that you no longer need to force momentum, because you are momentum. That you no longer need to speak your dream into existence, because your life itself is becoming the proof. Becoming is not the finish line. It's the transformation of identity. It's what happens when the grind is no longer a performance but a reflection. When the work is not what you do, it's who you are. This is what the world doesn't teach you. That the goal is never really the goal. The goal was never just the company or the book or the title or the audience or the financial freedom. The goal was to become the kind of person who could build it, and survive it, and lead it, and hold it with grace, and keep your soul intact as everything around you expanded. That was the real test. That's why it took so long. That's why it broke you open. Because this was never just about success. It was about becoming the version of yourself capable of carrying what success demands. There's a cost to becoming. And no, it's not always visible. It's the friendships you outgrew because they couldn't hold your evolution. It's the nights you spent alone with your thoughts while the rest of the world chased comfort. It's the sacrifices that made you question if it was all worth it. It's the version of you that had to die in silence so the stronger one could take its place. And you paid that cost without knowing what you'd gain in return. You paid it when no one was watching. You paid it when your only company was uncertainty and your only companion was persistence. That's what makes becoming sacred. Because you chose it. You earned it. No one handed it to you. Becoming is not about getting everything right. It's about getting back up every time you got it wrong and deciding you still believe in who you're becoming. It's about acting in alignment with that future identity, even when the results say otherwise. It's about refusing to let fear define your pace, and refusing to let failure define your value. It's about learning to listen to the voice inside you that doesn't beg for validation, it demands evolution. The voice that has whispered since the beginning, you were made for more. And now, you are becoming it. Not because it's easy, not because you're certain, but because every time you were given the chance to quit, you took one more step. And those steps, taken in faith, have become your foundation. Those small, relentless movements forward, taken when nobody was watching, are the reason you're still standing. And now, every scar you carry has become a badge. Every heartbreak has become architecture. Every closed door has become a corridor that led you here. You've outgrown the version of you that needed to be rescued. You've outlived the narrative that said you weren't enough. And now, you don't need a new dream, you need to own the one you already built. Because whether you can see it yet or not, you're already walking in answered prayers. You're already standing in spaces that once felt out of reach. You are already becoming the person the younger you desperately needed. And that is not a coincidence. That is the result of your refusal to give up. This is where the journey transforms. Not into ease, but into ownership. You are no longer asking if you're ready. You are no longer waiting for signs. You are no longer seeking permission. You are no longer hoping to arrive. You are walking like you already belong. Because becoming isn't about what you're building. It's about who you've become in the process of building it. You know your worth now, not in theory, but in experience. You've seen what you can survive. You've seen what you can create with nothing but grit and vision. You've seen how far you can go when your back is against the wall and the only fuel you have is belief. And that belief, in yourself, in the work, in the future, is now etched into your being. No one can take that from you. They can challenge it. They can doubt it. But they cannot unmake it. Because it's no longer just something you have. It's who you are. The final crossing, the one between chasing and becoming, is not marked by applause. It's not validated by followers or money or status. It's marked by a deeper knowing, a peace, a posture, a power. You begin to move differently. Not with desperation, but with conviction. You stop reacting and start leading. You stop overthinking and start executing. You stop hiding behind potential and start owning your presence. You're no longer waiting to be discovered. You've already discovered yourself. Becoming means that now the real work begins. Not because you're starting from scratch, but because you're finally building from truth. You don't need to prove anymore. You don't need to impress. You don't need to explain your path to people who were never built to walk it. All you need to do is continue. Continue rising. Continue creating. Continue holding the vision no matter how long it takes. Because now you are the evidence. You are the standard. You are the storm. This is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a new one. One where you are no longer shaped by the world, but one where you shape it. You no longer follow the script. You write it. You no longer chase bold dreams. You live them. Not someday, but now. Not hypothetically, but fully, relentlessly, completely. Because you did not just dream. You became. And that changes everything.